guys.
Hey Joe, it's good to see you again. It's been a while.
Been fun to be with you again.
Yeah, it's been great to catch up. And as you know, I'm always really curious about your thoughts on where things are going around learning and education and even leadership. And I know you've done lots of work in research in that area. So one of the themes at the Institute that we focus on is the future of learning, future of education. We think it's a cornerstone of the future workforce, that it's going to be a very continuous process of learning in order to stay competitive. So, just like, where's learning heading? Is it going to look like it does today in 5 years? Is it going to look different? How is it going to look different if it is? What are your thoughts?
Well, as you know, I'm a kind of work-based learning guy. And in some respects, where we can think about this as a throwback to the old days. You remember the old days of OJT,
yes,
on-the-job learning.
Yeah.
I think that's going to come back.
Yeah.
And part of this is really a debate about what does knowledge represent? What does it mean? Is it something that is lodged in the brain and it gets acquired when you acquire it from someone else? Or is it something that can occur in the midst of practice itself? So I'm on that end of the spectrum, as you know, and I think there's something very magical about work that can produce the kind of learning that is sustainable and that can help us in the future as we develop ourselves and we develop the necessary creativity that we need for progress in the United States.
Well, let me ask you this, because this comes up a lot in my talks with, I think you know Jay Cross and his work in informal learning. And Jay's sort of philosophy is that it's similar in a way in the fact that if I wanted to learn to be a photographer, I should just pick up the camera and go take pictures, right?
Right.
And in a way, that's on-the-job training or learning.
Right.
But I think there's got to be more than that to it, right?
Yeah. I think there's a cognitive component as well. But on the other hand, it may not be sufficient to just feel that you're going to be able to acquire the necessary, even meta skills, to be able to perform well in the workforce and whatever your career may be, by just studying things that come out of a book. Because again, that's the form of learning that we would call permanent. But I consider informal learning to be that form of learning that derives from more fluid forms of knowledge. And this is knowledge that occurs as we work on those imponderables, those difficult things that seem to kind of stymie us as we try to make our way. An anthropologist, a French anthropologist named Lévi-Strauss, referred to this as bricolage, right? And so this is kind of figuring out, how to kind of work with the tools that you have at your own disposal. And it's something that's not easy for a novice. So it does help to have a teacher, a mentor, an instructor, to help you learn to make those situational discriminations that can help you work your way and learn your way out of difficult problems. But I think it's some kind of combination of the academic, the classroom, the more cognitive kind of conceptual basis of learning with the practice.
Well, I do a lot of work in the corporate world, as you know, and one of the things that we run into all the time is someone will come up and say, okay, I agree, I hate lectures, I hate all this formal stuff that we're doing, but the senior management team wants every leader to learn this stuff. And so how can you construct something that would meet those needs and yet be more OJT or whatever?
Well, that lies within the field or the discipline that sometimes we refer to as the competency movement. And there is this view among some executives and people even in the HR field, as you know, that feel that all you have to do is come up with this set of generic competencies and teach those competencies to our staff, to our managerial staff, and of course we'll all be on the same team.
Exactly.
Right? But I don't think that enshrining knowledge, as it were, in a set of generic competencies is going to be able to get us off square one when it comes to dealing with, what did I call it? The imponderables, the
Right,
things that kind of really stymie us.
Yeah.
It's that experience that we have sometimes when we're stuck,
Mm-hmm.
right? What we need are more meta competencies or organic competencies that arise from doing the work itself, of which you are the expert. You've become the expert because
Right.
of your focus and concentration.
Right.
So I like to see the more progressive executive realize that this competency is not going to come from some kind of generic set of pieces of knowledge, but something that is going to arise from people doing their own specific work.
Okay. Okay, so I'm the learning manager at Corporation X, and I agree with you.
Yep.
How do I do it?
Right. Well, what you could do would be to bring people in kind of some kind of observer or research capacity and have them kind of observe and inquire about people as they're doing the work, right? And around the list that might be produced or the set of meta copies that might be produced, you could then bring others in who are new to the practice. And this, I guess, is the concern. How do you bring new people into the practice that can uptake almost as quickly as those that are currently expert, and have a conversation, have a dialogue about this experience, and this then becomes kind of like this mentorship experience that we remember from the old days of apprenticeship. And I think it's that kind of a real-time model that I think is going to be far more powerful than taking people, sending them away, you know, to some artificial place where they're going to apparently learn the competence and come back. Because when they come back, what's going to happen? They're going to unlearn most of the things because they probably don't apply to the work.
Absolutely.
And that, of course, takes place especially in the domain of leadership, the softer.
Absolutely. Well, you know, one of our predictions that we did a year or so ago was that there'll be a return to the apprenticeship model in the corporate world.
I can't agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think that the people in the training world today in the corporate world are struggling with a concept that executives have that whatever education we deliver should be like what I got.
Yeah. Right.
Whenever I got my executive education, which was almost for sure formal, classroom-based, and generic.
That's right. That's right.
And they don't realize how much they actually learned as they were
doing
it. Yeah. And so I think the real challenge is to kind of build mentor programs. And you know, one of the questions that we just got asked the other day was, should these be formal or informal? Should you have specifically appointed mentors, or should it just sort of arise accidentally? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow, yeah. I think it's nice when it arises naturally, but I don't think people are automatically great mentors or coaches, as we know, right? Often what happens in action learning, for example, when we're looking for coaches and sponsors of programs and we bring people in from the corporate world, they feel because of their immersion in the classroom model that the way to do it is to tell war stories, right? This is how I would do it, young lad or young lass. But really the mentorship role is to be the listener, isn't it? Right? And to kind of engage. And it's this engagement, this dialogue, this inquiry that is going to be the base of learning. I mean, communication probably is the fundamental resource that we have to produce new learning. So we need mentors and coaches to operate out of that domain, not out of a domain of being the expert who can tell you what you need to do.
I think that expert knowledge thing is the hard one. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, you know, this guy wants to be a mentor. And he thinks he's an expert, but he's not. And I'm afraid if I let him mentor, that he'll corrupt this person, right? Or they're not going to learn the right thing, you know? So, you know, I think I keep going back and saying, you know, to me the internet's the great informer. If you want data or facts or information, you can get that from, let's just say for sake of simplicity, from the internet. What you can't get from the internet is that thinking about what that means,
Right.
or how that plays out.
How that plays out in the instant case.
In that, yes. And
Right.
so I think the issue is really to forget that I think our old model was professor, teacher is a data dumper.
Yeah.
And my job as a teacher is to dump everything I know into your head,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that's probably not a valid model. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And what's probably more valid is that teacher has to be more like a Socrates.
Yeah, I think of the teacher probably the ideal teacher role as being a facilitator, the orchestrator of a series of events from which knowledge can emerge from the practice itself. And what would be the practice? Again, it's not just people having a nice debate about a passage in a book, but it would be really nice if the practice were engagement in whatever the craft is that people could be a philosophy text or it could be an engineering problem. I think it applies across the board. So of course that brings us to education model of higher education that I
Just going to ask you.
that
Where's it going, Joe?
Well,
What's going to happen there?
well, as
I mean, you've been in the higher ed formal education space at the university level for a long time.
right.
Has it changed since you began your career, and is it changed for the better or the worse?
It hasn't changed very much, Kevin, except that I made this move to Northeastern University because it's one of the better known co-op programs in the United States. Better known among very few.
And you might want to explain what a co-op program is.
Well, it's for viewers that don't know about it, a co-op program which is called the Sandwich Approach in the UK, by the way. It's called Work Integrated Learning in Australia. It's a program of studies where you intersperse your classroom education with a period of time when you actually do work in the workforce as just a regular employee. And you get paid for the work, and then you come back, and presumably when you're back in the classroom, you now have these experiences that you can then relate to the classroom experience. So it's this interspersing of both, and I think it's a wonderful model, and I would love to see that as the stellar model of higher education. But when you ask me if things change very much, I would say no, because I have very many co-op programs. So I think we're still using the tried and true classroom approach, where again the idea of knowledge is a transfer.
And what do you think about almost as sort of an aside here about the open university concept, or virtual, or University of Phoenix, or the online universities? Are they going to grow and dominate, or are they just a niche, or what's?
Oh, I think they're becoming very popular. We're seeing that, of course, at the grad level, even in the field that I work in, the MBA, for example, it's extremely popular, and I think there's a role for them. There's an opportunity to bring people and different societies, different cultures together. So we used to talk a lot about action learning, and there's this kind of new field called virtual action learning. And although I may have been a little dubious at times, I think there's some engagement in learning teams that can be extremely rich. I guess the question, though, is, can it duplicate the actual experience of dialogue in the way that you and I think about it as a kind of collaborative engagement? And I think that's an area where I think the tools have to kind of become just a little bit more sophisticated, because it's out of that dialogue that you create the practices and the concepts, right, that really talk to how we experience the world.
Right.
And can that be replicated, in a virtual environment?
It's a great question.
I don't have the answer.
I don't think anyone does yet. I mean, I've seen some really good attempts of mostly text-based, online sort of interaction conversations. I've delivered a course that way.
Right.
I thought it was really good in some ways, in that I could engage people that would not engage face to face.
Right.
On the other hand, you don't really have that sort of immediacy of give and take and so forth. So.
And not to mention when it comes just to kind of work through some of the technical skills you need. I mean, it's almost irreplaceable.
Right.
But in terms of the give and take that we associate with dialogic communication, I think we just need to kind of reach a higher level of advancement there. But it could be around the corner.
Yeah, I think it probably is. I
Yeah.
think it's partly a technology issue.
That's it,
You
yeah.
can get streaming real-time video.
Right.
That
I mean,
changes the whole game.
That does, yeah. And then we have to overcome, just minor, you might say, incidental concerns like, time changes.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're communicating with someone who's sleeping over in India, for
Yeah.
example?
Yeah, no question.
At least if synchronicity is your goal. If it's an asynchronous environment, we can probably
Doesn't
overcome
matter.
it.
But yeah, and I think the corporate world's been struggling with this synchronicity issue for quite a long
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Right.
I think the other issue is the sort of the sociological mindset changes, and people our age have a lot more trouble, I think,
Right.
interacting
Right.
in that world
I know.
than the younger kids do.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting that they're going to be very comfortable in this
Yeah,
space and
that's
find it maybe as engaging as we do face to
Yeah,
face.
right.
It'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yes, but that's going to be fascinating to follow.
So I think we're almost at the end of our time.
Oh, so fast.
I
We
know.
just got started,
I know,
Kevin.
we just got started. Any final thoughts? Or
Well,
if you're going to do your prediction for 2020 on what's education going to look like?
what's education going to look like? What's work going to look like?
Yeah.
Well, just a couple of thoughts on both. When it comes to work, I would think that we're going to include the relational aspects of work a little bit more in our thinking in the future. When it comes to work and career, I think we come from a tradition, maybe it's a Western tradition, that, we're the captain of our own destiny, and yet there's so many things that go on to interfere or intersect with our destiny, our intentions. So I think as we get more involved in social networks, as we begin to think about the various stakeholders that have an impact on our career, I think that will incorporate some changes in how we even view the very concept of work.
Yeah.
And then I think learning, it just follows suit. That learning is not just going to come from a historical source.
Yeah.
It's going to come from some kind of assemblage of these stakeholders, to our knowledge, whose role will become critical in enhancing our own learning.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Oh,
It's been great.
it's always great to talk with you.
Yeah.